Welcome to the X's and Argos film session for week 2 of the regular season. My name is Ben Grant. As I will say every week, these film sessions are not overly technical, but geared instead to teaching football fans a little bit more about the game. This week, we're going to focus on the amount of quarterback control in Coach Dinwiddie's offense. With college football becoming more and more coach-controlled, where the offensive unit is often looking toward the sideline pre-snap for the play call, it's very refreshing to see an offense like Coach Dinwiddie's that relies so heavily on quarterback decision-making. Offenses like this that rely heavily on intelligent quarterback play are generally systems created by former quarterbacks, which I guess makes sense, and this one's no exception. The roots of this system go back to John Hufnagel and Dave Dickinson. You could actually trace them back much further than that. But of course, now it's being run by Ryan Dinwiddie and Jarius Jackson. And all 4 of those men I just named are former quarterbacks. Having a former quarterback in your headset is always helpful. Even for simple reminders like we saw this week, even though it didn't quite work out. On McLeod Bethel-Thompson's last play where he overthrew DeVaris Daniels, you can actually see him in the huddle reminding Daniels to sell the double move. This instruction probably came from Coach Dinwiddie through the headset, reminding Bethel-Thompson to remind Daniels. You only have one chance on a play like this, and Coach Dinwiddie, who had set this up throughout the game, having DeVaris Daniels run a number of in-breaking routes out of the same look leading up to this, wanted to make sure that they didn't miss their one shot. Unfortunately, they did. But it wasn't for a lack of reminding. And it's just nice to have a quarterback in your headset like that as a quarterback. There are a lot of elements that can make a system quarterback friendly, like the ability to call protections instead of having the center do it, or having the flexibility to audible in any situation. But what we're going to look at today are what's called check with me's and RPOs. Now, check with me's, sometimes we'll call those double play calls or double calls, and there are lots of different interpretations of the term check with me's. The version that the Argos run are basically where there are 2 plays called in the huddle, and then the quarterback lets everyone know if they're still okay to run the first play or if they're going to switch to the second. The TV coverage doesn't always catch this communication, but we did see a few examples of this in the Calgary game, especially during that opening drive where Bethel-Thompson gave his receivers a thumbs up or sometimes 2 thumbs up. Don't confuse that gesture with the same gesture he sort of makes, the raised hand, which McLeod uses to indicate time for a shift or a pre-snap receiver motion prior to their waggle. It's a pretty clear thumbs up or 2 thumbs up, and that means they're sticking with the first play. They're good to go. So what are quarterbacks looking for in these check with me's? They want to see which of the 2 plays called will fare better against how the defense is currently set. So if we're talking about a passing play, which we often are in these cases, then they might be looking to see if anyone's pressing, who's off, at what depth, and it all depends on the routes being run. In this example from last week, they've got quads to the left, and McLeod is good with it, as you see, and they end up running kind of a quick out to Braverman. It looks a little bit like a bubble screen. So what did McLeod see in this alignment that he liked? Like, what did he like about the defense? And the answer is pretty simple, and it's almost always the answer when it comes to check with me's and RPOs. It's numbers. Here we've got 4 versus 3. Which also tells him it's probably zone. Both are good things on this play. Now, unfortunately, Braverman makes a strange cut back to the inside. This should have been a big play to the outside. You can see the gap here. And that tells you that the decision was correct. McLeod Bethel-Thompson was right. This play was well called for this defense. It just didn't happen to turn into something big. So that's check with me's, but we're not done looking at this play because this play is also an RPO, which we're also going to be talking about today. RPO stands for run pass option. So once Bethel-Thompson has settled on this play, he now has to read whether he's going to give the ball to White up the middle, that's the run part of the run pass option, or get it out to Braverman, the pass part of the run pass option. Those are his options. This is obviously a really easy decision on this particular play with the dog blitz coming. You don't want to hand the ball up the middle. But he already knew pre-snap that he was going to the pass because of that 4 versus 3 that we already talked about. You can't usually read an RPO pre-snap. Just like with other run option reads, you often have to see how the play develops. Against Winnipeg, the coaching staff gave the quarterbacks a lot of what we'll call 3 option RPOs. So they would leave the contain man for the quarterback to read, just like you would in a regular read option run, but then there will also be a receiver to dish it out to. The very first RPOs with Urban Meyer and Alex Smith out in Utah looked almost exactly like this play, sort of like a run pass option. So Bethel Thompson sees the contain play him honestly, so he gives the ball. He could have chucked it out to Rodgers, but they have numbers inside, so this is the correct call. They end up opening a huge hole. The timing is crucial on this play, especially because we've got man coverage. Braverman's going to be bringing his man across the box into the running lane, but because this is well timed, the defender is fault-footed. He can't get back to make the tackle. The tight angle here is awesome because you can see exactly the effect of this and what McLeod sees. If the end crashes here, McLeod would have pulled it and either run it himself or more likely tossed it out to Rodgers. You can see how a running quarterback would obviously help with these kinds of plays. And remember this play because the timing isn't quite as good in a play we'll look at in just a couple minutes. All right, very similar play here. This time, it's not a great read because they don't have the numbers inside. It turns out not to matter anyway because Kongbo gets through and he was accounted for, so that sort of ruins everyone's plans. And that's the thing with football. Like you can be as clever as you like in your play design, your play calling, but ultimately, if one of the players misses their assignment, then everything can blow up. I don't really like this read either. We've got 6 in the box, 5 blockers. They're not leaving the contain, so there's not really an option for Bethel Thompson to keep it himself, but I would rather take my chances with Braverman outside one-on-one. The play works, though, because Willett jukes an unblocked Jesse Briggs out of his underwear, so this sort of neutralizes the numbers advantage that Winnipeg had on this play. It ends up being a really nice gain. This is blocked like a run, but technically a forward pass. They started doing this with a lot of jet sweeps. That way, if there's a miscommunication or if the ball is fumbled, it actually stops the play. It counts as an incomplete pass. We're still going to call this an RPO because it's still blocked like a run. The decision-making is still as you would decide to run the ball or pass the ball. He is deciding here to shovel it or not, or to throw it to the outside. He's got Tavares on a 3-step slant. I think he was looking for man for that read. Slants are usually good against zone, but with a single receiver, it's 1 versus 2. So this is the correct read to get this to the jet action. They didn't count on Willie Jefferson coming through untouched and destroying everything, so that's what went wrong in this play, but the actual read was fine. As a fan, the best way to spot an RPO is to watch the offensive line first and then look to the receivers. So on an RPO, the line blocks like it's a run regardless of what happens. So you'll see them get downfield. So generally speaking, if the O-line is run blocking and it's a quick pass, then it was probably an RPO and the quarterback chose to pass. Similarly, if it's a run but the receivers are running quick routes, then it was probably an RPO that the quarterback decided to hand off. And so then the question, well, why always quick routes? Remember that your linemen are run blocking. And so if your receivers are running anything deeper than a slant, a smoke route, a speed out, a flat route, your linemen are going to be too far downfield. You're going to end up getting a flag thrown on you because you can't have linemen downfield when you pass. Now, the referees will give you a little bit of an allowance with an RPO, but only for quick stuff. They won't let you go deep downfield on any of these. They'll throw that flag. Earlier, we talked about how crucial the timing is on these plays. Obviously, this is a disaster here. The line leaves the contain man so that Levi Noel can kick him out, but he needs more speed coming across. Not only so he doesn't crush White right at the mesh point, and he's lucky this wasn't worse. He could have knocked White down. This could have been a fumble. but he of course misses his block on Jefferson. And he's supposed to bring his coverage right through the box like we saw before. Remember where that DB was fault-footed and couldn't get back to make the tackle? But because of the collision here, he actually keeps his defender in the box. So that negates the numbers advantage they had. They seem so rarely to throw this quick screen off of these. I like these, and I think that they're often there. I expect us to see more of that option being taken as we get later on into the year. Nick Arbuckle is a slightly better option at quarterback when it comes to RPOs. Funny enough, in the game against Winnipeg, Bethel Thompson ran 8 RPOs compared to Arbuckle's 3, but that was situational. Running the ball wasn't really an option late for most of Arbuckle's time in the game, so that's why he only had 3. Arbuckle's RPO decision-making is really good. He just looks really comfortable with it. And it's not easy to do. It's actually really difficult to do. I asked him about this, and he said the reason he's so comfortable with it is because they did so much of it at Georgia State, which makes sense. And I also like the idea of him running those 3 option RPOs because he's a pretty good runner as well. So they've got to play him honestly on the defense. If they leave that contain man, he can't crash down because Arbuckle is actually a threat to keep it and run. This is similar to the play that we just saw where Noel ran into White. Here the block's coming from Rogers and the contain crashes instead of coming around wide. So we got a Z quick down here to Gittens Jr., which I still like. Arbuckle could keep it here, but he's probably not doing that with his hamstring not being perfect anyway. All 5 linemen make their blocks. This is perfect. This is one of the best blocked plays of the evening. And then Rogers cuts down Kongbo. DeVeris doesn't really get on his block, but he doesn't really have to because of what White does. He sets it up so well. He steps to the outside and he basically uses DeVeris as a pick. And then it's just all John White. And I should mention on this play too, RPOs are difficult for the running back as well because they've got to sort of softly cradle that ball as the quarterback rides them through that mesh point before they make that decision as to whether or not they're going to leave it with the running back or pull it back out again. And it's a really difficult thing to do as a running back because you're facing the possibility of getting crushed and yet you can't squeeze tight onto that ball. And I've seen at times where running backs have actually ripped off quarterbacks' gloves that they were wearing because they were holding on too tight. The quarterback goes to try and pull that ball away and he can't. It's just a really tough thing to do. John White is an excellent RPO running back. He has the faith in the quarterback. He has the patience to wait it out. And this seems like a pretty good play for us to end it on, just finishing on a positive here. One last thing I want to say about check with me's and RPOs is that they help disguise the play call in the huddle. This is a little bit of a tell sometimes for defenses because short calls in the huddle are often runs, long calls in the huddle are usually passes. But if you're mixing in double calls and RPOs, the language is longer, it takes more time, so there's less of a tell there for the defense to pick up on. I enjoyed that part of it just on its own. I hope you enjoyed this week's X's and Argos film session. My name is Ben Grant. I will see you next week.